So there's a really interesting and kind of funny social media trend going around that I thought I'd make a video about. It's these posts like Italians saw this and moved to New Jersey, or Dominicans saw this and moved to the Bronx, or Armenians saw this and decided to move to Glendale. Some of these videos have tens of millions of views, so I thought why not dig a little deeper into this trend and try to find out, well, yeah, why did millions of Italians move from places that looked like this to places that looked like this? After all, Italian immigration into the US constitutes one of the most significant diasporic movements in modern history.
People from every nation settled the United States of America. The 8 million who live in New York City today are the descendants of original settlers. There are more Italians in New York City than in Florence, Italy.
The mass arrival of Italians to American shores during the late 19th and early 20th centuries reshaped the US not only demographically, but culturally, economically, politically, and in so many other ways. But what I think is particularly unique about Italians in America is how, generations later, descendants of these immigrants are seen as one and the same as their other white European counterparts. This definitely wasn't the case when Southern Italians started immigrating here in the late 1800s. America's proudly English, Germanic, and Scandinavian descendants did not take too kindly to such large amounts of mostly Southern Italian immigrants. For context, between 1880 and 1924, a total of around 4 million Italian immigrants came over to settle in America. And keep in mind, these Southern Italian immigrants came in legally, largely through Ellis Island, located off the shore of, you guessed it, New Jersey. Though Ellis Island wasn't handing out citizenship to just anyone, Southern Italian immigrants first arriving there were rigorously assessed, both mentally and physically. Italian immigrants showing visible signs of physical or mental issues actually had their clothing marked with chalk and written letters denoting their impairments. X for suspected mental illness, H for heart problems, E for eye diseases, and so on, so that they can be screened even further. This is especially crazy to think about in the modern day because, as we know, during the depths of a global pandemic, America was letting in record numbers of illegal immigrants with no concern about anybody's mental or physical state of being. Inspectors asked a series of standardized questions, including whether the immigrant had ever been in prison, was a polygamist, or was seeking work. These systematic procedures reflected a widespread fear in the US about disease, criminality, and the perceived burden of impoverished Southern Italian immigrants. But why were Southern Italian immigrants looked at this way? And with such early discrimination against them, why would they put their entire lives on the line and risk everything for a chance to become an American citizen? And the answer to that is because they literally had nothing to lose. Southern Italy in the late 1800s was far from paradise. In the couple decades both before and after Italy's unification in the 1860s, Southern Italy remained culturally fragmented, economically underdeveloped, and politically isolated. While the northern elites owned all the homes and imposed heavy taxation, the south was a land full of agrarian peasants. And after a series of poor harvests and environmental catastrophes, even subsistence farming became unattainable. By the 1880s, there was nothing left in southern Italy for Southern Italians, so they had to look elsewhere for survival. But before the age of mass Italian migration into America, a very small number of Southern Italians managed to make their way to the US in the early 1800s, typically working here in the maritime trades. A few thousand even became successful enough to write back home and even return telling tales of the young and prospering new nation. In bigger cities like Naples and Palermo, newspapers would print these stories of what life was like in America. And once the 1840s and 1850s rolled around, the US became heavily idealized in Italian culture, often known as a land of bread and gold. And it was during this early Gilded Age of rapid American industrialization that it became desperate for as many workers as possible. Young, old, black, white, men, and even women, and it still wasn't enough to meet our demands. Southern Italians saw the perfect opportunity to escape starvation and stagnation and start life anew in a place that actually needed them. States like New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts were particularly popular as they were hubs for large, established cities that demanded lots of labor in order to sustain and progress their rapid growth. This was when the first Little Italies began to form, with a few of them still around today. Manhattan's dwindling enclave on Mulberry Street, Philadelphia's South 9th Market District, and Boston's North End being the most popular. These were areas within close walking distance to major industrial hubs and ports of the time, and they offered a sense of community and safety for Southern Italian immigrants who, at the time, were being heavily discriminated against, as they were perceived as non-white and non-European. Over time, entire Italian villages would migrate to these enclaves, bringing with them culture, tradition, religion, and, best of all, their beloved Italian cuisine. But while many called Boston, Philadelphia, and New York City home at first, over time this started to change. The tenement housing they were provided with became overpriced and overcrowded as a result of rapid population growth. Many of these Southern Italian immigrants looked to New Jersey for better land opportunities, cheaper housing, and overall just more jobs. New Jersey, too, was already a land of industrial expansion and urbanization during the Gilded Age. With the introduction of hundreds of thousands of Southern Italian immigrants, it wasn't long before New Jersey became the quintessential land of industry. Its location between New York City and Philadelphia pulled the factories and warehouses out of the big cities and into better, more regionally centralized hubs. New Jersey's industrial cities like Newark, Paterson, Trenton, and Jersey City harbored tremendous amounts of Southern Italian immigrants. The state wasn't as populous as Massachusetts or Pennsylvania or New York, and as a result, many Southern Italian immigrants not only formed their own enclaves, but completely reshaped the very cities they settled in. But it wasn't just shipping and factory work either. New Jersey's agricultural potential, particularly in the southern counties such as Cumberland, Salem, and Atlantic, attracted many Southern Italians with agrarian backgrounds, as they were able to lease or eventually purchase farmland, leading to thriving farming communities still around today. Though all of this new, disruptive, and honestly very different culture ended up clashing with the mostly Protestant native-born Americans who descended from a more proper, refined, and assimilated stock of early American settlers, mostly Germanic, French, English, and Scandinavian. These Americans valued safety and prosperity in their wildly successful new nation they had worked so hard to build from the ground up. They weren't sure if all of these new immigrants arrived with good or bad intentions, and surely not helping the Southern Italian case was their overrepresentation in petty crime like gambling, pickpocketing, and street fighting. These smaller incidents compounded and triggered a broader effort to discriminate against Italians altogether. This era throughout the 1920s and 30s gave rise to the sensationalization of the Italian mafia, where American society made it easy to call any Italian suspected of wrongdoing to be mafioso. But from the native-born Americans' perspective, the reality was a rise in crime directly correlated with Southern Italian immigration. And although most newcomers had good intentions, Americans at the time can't be wrong for what is essentially pattern recognition. But these attitudes really began to shift during World War II, where Italians and native-born American soldiers had no choice but to fight alongside each other against a common enemy. And it really was this brotherly wartime bonding that proved to so many skeptics that most Southern Italian immigrants were no less American than themselves. Italians were not only building the Empire State Building and the Brooklyn Bridge, they were fighting for the country that rescued them from certain death had they remained in their homeland. Southern Italian immigrants didn't view America and her benefits as something they were entitled to. They didn't wish to suck the country dry of its resources and funnel it into their own pockets with nothing given back in return. No, they worked hard in factories, on shipping docks, and in coal mines, just so they could make something from nothing. And they did. In time, Southern Italian immigrants and Americans realized how similar they really are. Post-war, the children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of all those original immigrants ended up assimilating quite well. Although this development was slow at first, Southern Italian descendants learned to read and write English, went to universities, expanded their labor capabilities, and in time eventually became racially and categorically the same as other white Western European descendants. These descendants fully bought into American culture and ways of life. And today, millions of Italian Americans are now able to call America their multi-generational homeland and even place of birth. Of course, famously, Italian Americans have always distinguished themselves in certain ways. After all, this is an old stock of human blood. So no matter how many generations of assimilation, Italian Americans will always have a sort of uniqueness about them, whether that's in tradition, dialect, or gesticulation. And today, New Jersey still remains the home of many of these original Southern Italian immigrant descendants, with the Italian American population making up over 17% of New Jersey's current population. So yeah, while the naturally rugged beauty of the coasts of southern Italy were and are gorgeously scenic and beautiful, there was a time when New Jersey was somehow even more desirable. Oh, how times have changed. I'll see you next week, right here, from Fourth Place.
Shoppers in Jersey City enjoy both an urban and suburban atmosphere.